Hello and welcome to the TMC Newsroom. My name is Rich Tehrani. Thanks for watching us today. We're at the Cloud Expo in New York 2011. On our show today is Dr. Rich Wolski. He is the co-founder and CTO of Eucalyptus Systems. And welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I think we should start off by talking about how you've been an innovator in the private cloud space for years now, for a number of years. And I wanted to hear more about the early days and your perspective on the market.
Sure. Cloud computing came about in 2007, and it was primarily thought of as a public utility computing model. And my research group at UCSB, Computer Science Department, we decided for research purposes we wanted to build out of open source components our own version of cloud computing, primarily so that we could study it. But it had to be able to run in our data centers. It had to be able to run with a variety of vintages of technologies, which were available at the time because universities tend to keep things for a very long time. And so we did that. As part of our research project, we actually built an infrastructure that could do what the public clouds could do, but with our own private resources. At the time, it wasn't clear that private clouds would have anything other than research interest, but it turned out that as soon as we released the software as open source from the university, there was tremendous commercial interest. People were very, very interested in being able to have the cloud paradigm, the models that people use for managing infrastructure in the cloud, but under their own control with the IT processes that were already in place. And so while public clouds continue to be an important technological breakthrough, private clouds have emerged since then as being almost equally as important.
Now, and there's a big market, especially for like Fortune class companies, right? Mm-hmm. That those are primarily the companies that are big enough to take advantage of a private cloud. Or maybe, I don't want to niche it too much, but there's also .com type companies or those companies that have strong web presence.
Yeah, there's a number of different companies. It sort of sectionalizes in the way that you suggest. So the first companies actually that talked to us were Fortune 10. We actually had visitors at the university from companies in the Fortune 10 who were sending teams to visit us, to talk to the researchers who were working on the projects, and to understand what was going on. And since then, since we commercialized, we still have those customers. We have a lot of Web 2.0 customers, folks that are really providing services over the internet, media companies. If you're serving content over the internet as a big part of your business, clouds are a huge technological advance. And then the software industry. Today, if you're making software and you're not, Eucalyptus, you have to be thinking about both an on-premise offering and a cloud offering. And we see a lot of software companies that are thinking about or developing a public cloud offering using Eucalyptus as a deployment mechanism and to use the same software base on-premise and in a public cloud.
So technologically speaking, what are some of the benefits of working with your company as opposed to trying to roll out a private cloud on your own?
Right. There's a couple. First is that we use very tried and true, best of breed, open source e-commerce technologies. E-commerce has been around for a long time. People have built very scalable, stable, and secure e-commerce websites using open source technologies for about 15 years. And so the heart of Eucalyptus is a deep understanding of how those technologies can be brought to bear in almost any data center to achieve the cloud paradigms, the cloud abstractions. Then the second advantage is ecosystem. Because we are AWS compatible, the software that's being developed today to run in Amazon's AWS, which is it's a vast industry, that software is available to you on-premise with Eucalyptus the day you deploy it. So if you're in the business of rolling your own private cloud, you have to come to grips with the constituent technologies, and then you have to figure out how you're going to get other people's software to run against those technologies because you can't write everything yourself. Eucalyptus solves both those problems for you.
So a couple questions that I'm sure you've heard before are, if you're using so much open source, number one, does that potentially make it more of an inviting target for hackers who understand open source? And then number two, talk to me about the situation with open source, the cloud, and patents. And I know there's lawsuits, and Nortel, for example, has got a portfolio of patents they're about to sell, and we don't know who's going to buy them. The patent issues with open source are not necessarily solved.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Okay, well, let's talk about the security issue first. So it's true. Open software provides transparency that can be used for good or evil. And but the good news is it's used for both good and evil. If you think about how Linux works, Linux is very open. It's also the operating system of choice for data centers today. And the reason that that works is because while people are constantly finding new ways to hack Linux, the people who are using it for professional reasons are constantly finding ways to defend Linux from being hacked. And that can only happen if the software base is open. If it were closed, when a hole is opened, or when a hacker finds an attack, that attack hole can be there for many, many months or years while the people in the company, and only those people in the company who have access to the software, are attempting to solve the problem. So what we have found is that while the time to security breach is short, the time to remediation is shorter with open source software. And we think that is a big advantage of Eucalyptus as an open source platform. The patent issue is a very, very interesting one. So far, open source has really been about software, and software is copyrightable. Right? You can patent pieces of ideas that go into software, but it's actually not well understood how some of those patents can be enforced. And we're starting to see challenges now to software patent laws. However, it is absolutely the case that processes can be patented. And if you build a cloud platform and then invent a process for it, it's not clear entirely, particularly in a public cloud, how the patent ownership rights transfer if you're inventing using the shared resource as part of the invention. And so I think there's going to be some thinking that needs to be done there. So far, the idea that the clouds are utilities, that when you rent something from a utility or when you run your own private cloud, then the intellectual property that is generated as a result of that rental is, belongs to you. But it's conceivable that some new laws have to be written to make that crystal clear.
Okay, that's a great answer, and it's an evolving, like I said, it's an evolving area, and there's it's going to be very exciting to see what happens in this space, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, some of it will be solved with licensing, some of it we'll see.
Licensing is actually a really thorny problem because most licenses today are written to be per seat or per machine, per server, and in a cloud, sharing is much easier. So it's not clear if I've licensed a certain number of instances of a software product and then I run it in a cloud legitimately under my own power, whether the license gives me the power to give access to that fixed number of instances to all of my employees simply because the cloud makes that easier. And I think that's one of the things that the industry is struggling with right now is how do we take licenses that were written for non-cloud and convert them into cloud-friendly licenses.
So as a pioneer in this space, I've got to ask you, what is the part of the business that makes you most passionate every day about going to work? What is it that you enjoy doing?
It's really, a time of great innovation. Infrastructure, as opposed to web development, internet development, has been something that, relatively speaking, has been stagnant in terms of innovation. That's not to say that there hasn't been some great technologies developed. Infrastructure management today is much more efficient without cloud even than it was 20 years ago. But it hasn't been something where we've seen great technological advance. And the wide reach of infrastructure availability that clouds make possible has been the stimulative force. Suddenly, people who would have no real way to access infrastructure at that scale can, through a cloud, obtain that access almost through a web browser. And so it's an exciting time when so many more people can have access to the technologies that we've been working on for 25 years or more.
So what's next for your company from a technology standpoint? What are some of the really cool things? And even if you can't tell us specifically, but give us some ideas of, I'm watching this video right now, and let's say I'm an enterprise decision maker looking to move my company to private or hybrid clouds. What are some of the awesome things on the horizon?
Yeah, data management. Right, that doesn't sound awesome, but it is. What's really interesting, and what's going to make the cloud so much more useful in a short period of time is the ability to figure out how and where data needs to be managed. Right now, with on-premise clouds or with public clouds alone, it's pretty flat. You put your data in this repository, and then maybe for performance reasons you move it around a little bit. But with a public cloud and a private cloud together, the policies around how data is managed, the privacy concerns, all have to be managed by the cloud. It can't really be a manual process because that's where the scale comes from. The automation in the cloud provides the scale. So we have to come up with a way to allow businesses reliably to define data management mechanisms and policies that will protect them and at the same time maintain their scale. And that's coming. That's coming now. There's two different models, one for public and one for private, and they're going to homogenize. And when that happens, it's going to be a much easier sell and a much more natural use case for private and public clouds.
Well, Rich, thanks for being on the program today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful.